Thank you for tuning in once again to Gods, Demons, and Magic. This is your host, Sri Sachinandan Das. So we're continuing with the Egyptian Mysteries by Iamblichus. And in this section, Abhaman, the Egyptian priest, is answering the questions of Porphyry. And Porphyry has asked many things about the nature of the universe. Who are the gods? Of what are they composed? What is their nature? How do they act? What are the daemons? And what is the system of magic or theurgy? How does it work? So many questions. The cosmology of the universe. What is the absolute truth? All of these things have been asked, and now Abhaman begins to answer his questions. And he begins by pronouncing an invocation to the Egyptian god Tehuti or Jehuti. The Greeks called him Thoth, and he's the god of priests, and he presides over knowledge, particularly knowledge of the gods. And this is what Porphyry is asking about. And also Abhaman makes it clear that Thoth is a universal god. He's not just a god of the Egyptians, but he's actually a god within reality, the same reality we all share. And he says to Porphyry that I can answer your questions if I'm filled with the power of Thoth. He actually says if I participate in the God, if the power of that God is working through me and I become a part of that God, then as the God who is in charge of all mystical knowledge and all magical knowledge, and who is the God of priests essentially, then I will have the power to reveal these truths to you, these truths of the subtle realm. He tells Porphyry that other Greeks in the past, very prominent philosophers in the Greek world, have also come to Egyptian priests, just as you're doing now, and asked questions. And they were accepted and instructed, and he mentions Pythagoras and Plato, and other ones as well. And, it's generally accepted in the various ancient histories, such as those by Plutarch, that Pythagoras and Plato had both visited Egypt and stayed there for some time, and were initiated into the ancient Egyptian priesthood, or at least instructed by Egyptian priests. So in the last episode we discussed the process of creation, how the sun god Horus, who's considered the demiurge, or the creator of the universe, the secondary creator, who takes the elements of the universe that were created by the one transcendent Supreme Lord and then orders them into the reality we experience. So he appears upon this lotus flower, and the lotus petals open. There's a beautiful child there, and the child is effulgent and brilliant, like 10,000 suns. And when he opens his eyes, the whole universe becomes illuminated. And that child has within it the potential of creation. All of the universe as it will appear when it's ordered, it's there within his heart. And then those ideals, those thoughts, they then come out of his mouth as spoken verbal speech, as audible vibration. It is that vibration of Horus, his speaking, that actually orders the universe. And so the god Thoth, he's considered the tongue of Horus. When that sort of potential of creation that's within the heart of Horus, when it becomes clear thoughts, clear ideas, and a plan, a conception in the mind of Horus of what the creation will be, that is essentially Thoth. And when those thoughts and ideas then come out of the mouth of Horus, vibrated by the tongue of Horus, and order the creation into the world we experience, that process of divine thought, which transforms into divine speech, which transforms into creation, this is Thoth. And so as such, he's actually the first created god. He is the son of Horus, the first son, and he's born from his heart. And therefore oftentimes he is known as Heart of Ra, or Heart of Re. That's one of his names. And because being the tongue of the Creator who speaks things directly into manifestation, he has this tremendous creative potential, which is at the heart of magic itself. And the ultimate magic is you just simply manipulate matter by speaking. And that's precisely what Thoth does. And so he is the greatest of magicians, and he is considered the god of the magicians and the god of the priests. And similarly, what he gives to mankind is that same power. And so all of the techniques and cultic rituals used to manipulate the world and to communicate with the gods, to communicate with the daemons, to effect change in reality through magical formulas, all of these things are given by Thoth. Thoth is a lunar deity. He's strongly connected to the moon, the god of the moon and the protector of the moon, and he really imbibes the qualities of the moon. He's also depicted as a god with the body of a man and the head of an ibis, or an Egyptian swan-like bird. And the Egyptian ibis is black and white, just like the colors of the moon against the night sky. And he has a beak very much like a crescent moon. And it's very interesting because the ibis has a very peaceful, contemplative mood as it stands there, say, within the rivers of the Nile, contemplating the waters. So in the same way, the moon sort of hangs over reality in this very peaceful, contemplative, watchful state. So you'll see that the ibis is a very lunar type of animal. Thoth is also depicted as an ape, and oftentimes with a crescent moon on his head. And this is thought to represent the side of Thoth where he's dwelling deep within mysteries and divine wisdom. He's very thoughtful and contemplative. Oftentimes you would find this ape depiction of Thoth in libraries, like a library would traditionally have an image of Thoth there, and is strongly connected to the scribes of Egypt as well. And being the god of the moon, he's connected to the calendar as an agricultural society that very much depended upon the movements and fluxes of nature and the rising and falling of the river. They calculated time primarily by a lunar calendar. The various religious festivals and sacrifices that were practiced within the Egyptian religion were done according to the lunar calendar. And as such, Thoth was seen as the regulator of religious worship within Egypt. He's the one that ultimately orders and decides what time all the various religious and cult practices will be done. And he's the one that actually gave the cult practices themselves. Any of those that were considered bona fide or true had their origins in Thoth. And he's also the one who is considered to be the constructor of the temples themselves, these magnificent buildings wherein the cult worshipped happened. He was the one who sort of gave the original architectural plans to mankind, or gave them the power to practice this divine form of building and construction. In fact, oftentimes when temples were constructed, then there would be a seal of approval on it, written in the hieroglyphs, that this has been constructed according to the rules of Thoth. As well as the worship inside the temple, there would be a seal of approval upon it. This worship is being done according to the rules of Thoth. So he was the god who was considered the source of sacred building and construction, and magnificent things such as the design of the pyramids. In fact, there's so many people question, who built the pyramids, where did they come from, who designed them, whose idea was it. If you were to ask any of the ancient Egyptians building it, they would tell you that the design of the pyramids came from Thoth. And the sacred writings that would adorn these temples, the hieroglyphs, continually repeated by generations of Egyptians, they were considered to have their origins in Thoth. Even the most minute aspect of temple worship was considered to have its origin in him, including the making of ointments and the making of incense. All of this was done according to these divine instructions, which originated with this god. And among all of the other gods, he was considered their priest. He was the one that performed their rituals. Therefore, he's the god of the priests. He's the priest among the gods. In fact, in the pyramid texts describe how he officiated over the body of Osiris during the funeral of Osiris. And the funeral of Osiris is the basis of the funerals of everyone else in Egypt. They all follow the same pattern established in those texts. And so just as a priest would prepare someone else to approach, to leave this world and to go through the tribulations and trials of the underworld, so similarly it was Thoth who prepared the body of Osiris and guided him through the underworld. And Thoth was the guide through the underworld for everyone. Your average Egyptian at the time of death expected to be greeted by Thoth, and Thoth would actually take them through the tribulations of the underworld and bring them before the tribunal of gods to be judged. He would plead the individual's case as if they're lawyer, and then he would take their heart and put it on the scale and weigh it against the feather of Mut. And then finally, when the tribunal of gods passed their judgment, he would record that verdict as the scribe of the gods. And in this, he is considered to be extremely knowledgeable, extremely powerful. In fact, he's considered to exist above time and to be able to see past, present, and future equally. He can see the past and the future just as he's looking at the present. And not only that, this unstoppable power of his knowledge, it sort of overwhelms and consumes everything around him. Not even the other gods can stand before his incredible wisdom. And therefore he knows the hearts of all men. He knows everything. And I find it interesting that this is the individual who's appointed to you as your lawyer, essentially, to plead your case, because he not only knows that he has the whole picture, he can see you and understand everything you've done, but he also can see within you and can see your motivations and can see the purity of your heart or the corruption of your heart. He knows you completely, and therefore he's able to explain who you are exactly in a very clear, honest and truthful way to the gods and give them a picture of reality. So it's because of his intervention that you're judged honestly and righteously by the gods. And he's also considered a protector in the underworld. In fact, one of his titles is the Lord of Terror. Now, he's not terrible to us. He's considered to be very kind and gentle and generous, very sweet person, but to the demons, to those ghostly creatures who will try to, tear you apart on the path of the underworld and destroy you and steal from you, all these different things, he's considered extremely forceful and powerful. In fact, when Osiris was traveling through the underworld, it was Thoth who protected him on his trip. And as we mentioned, he's the heart of Ra. He's the very tongue of the Creator. His words have tremendous power. And so if any sort of demon or devil or ghost or some kind of negative entity comes forward to cause a disturbance, just with a word he can blast them back with unimaginable power. There's no form of evil that can stand before him. In fact, the Egyptian priests in their role as exorcists, they would invoke the name of Thoth and call down his power, and he was known for his strength. And on the other side, he has the power to soothe the gods. For example, if the gods are angry, simply by his speaking, which is considered so powerful, he can pacify them and make them happy. He can convert their anger to peacefulness and a charitable mood of giving blessings. And so these are kind of two functions of priests traditionally, right? To placate the gods when the gods are angry and to repel the forces of evil. In addition to that, he was known as a healer. And especially he was known as a healer of scorpion attacks, because there's one story where he saved the child Horus from the stings of a scorpion. And so traditionally, sort of like repelling scorpions and healing the stings, you would use various incantations and amulets devoted to Thoth. But in general, he was considered a powerful healer god. In fact, when the eye of Horus was brought back from being stolen and ripped out by Set, it was Thoth who actually healed Horus and put his eye back into his head. And in general, he has a very close relationship to Horus, the sun god. He's considered to be like his minister. The sun is the king, and Thoth is his faithful assistant and scribe. And he's the originator of written language and speech, as well as the power of oration. And he's the god of reason. He's that which reasons the order of the world from chaos. In fact, and some stories tell how he actually takes the body of the god Set after he's destroyed. And Set is, of course, the god of chaos. And he takes that body and he pulls out the sinews. And he creates the order of the world from those sinews. So literally he's ordering chaos. But primarily it's through the process of logical reasoning and thought, and then the process of creative speech. And just as he's the scribe of the gods, so similarly he's worshipped by all of the scribes of ancient Egypt. He's considered to be a god of scholars. And he's also considered to be the god who originates astrology and understanding of the harmonies of the planets and their movements, as well as fine art. It is for these reasons that when the Greeks came across Thoth, they identified him with Hermes. Hermes being Mercury, and he's sharing the same qualities, the god of oration and speech and logic and reason and thought, as well as being the minister of the sun, who is the king. And so it is to this Thoth or Hermes that Abaman, the Egyptian priest, offers his reverence and asks to be empowered by him to answer these questions, and also indicates that any type of answer that he may give ultimately has its origins in Thoth, and that is what gives his answers their credibility. So thank you very much for joining us once again on God's Demons and Magic. This is your host, Sri Sachinandan Das. We hope that you've enjoyed this. If you found anything valuable in this, please like and subscribe. If you're listening on iTunes, please visit srisachinandana.com/iTunes and leave a positive review. Thank you again, and we hope that you'll join us next time on God's Demons and Magic.